ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the JFK Assassination Information Center. As you will notice, most of us here at the table have on the same uniform. The only reason I get to go first is I'm the only one wearing white shoes.
No sound. No sound.
Can you hear us now?
It's not the one.
Now can you hear me? I would like to start by introducing the panel. Some of these gentlemen are active members of the center here, others are not. On my far left is the Reverend Jack Shaw of Dallas, who is the Executive Director of the Marketplace Christian Network, a Dallas-based ministry involving counseling and consulting in the community. He is a Baptist minister and a practicing psychologist. Next, the gentleman in the white beard is Joe West. He is a licensed private investigator from Houston. He has been essential in digging up, and I mean literally, digging up much of the information you will hear here today. He is not a member of the center, but has been cooperating in this endeavor. Next, this little short fellow here is J. Gary Shaw, who is from Cleburne, Texas. He is an architect and a businessman and an assassination researcher. He has been involved in this case for about 20 years. I am one of the 3 directors of the center. I was an acquaintance of John Kennedy. I went to school with him, and I've been working on this case for some 26 years. So I'm probably the most worn out of all of the researchers. Next, sitting here to my right, is Larry Howard. He is a builder, a businessman, and one of the 3 directors of the center. Next is Larry Harris, who works for the federal government. He is the research director of the center here and has been working on this case for many, many years. Sitting next to him is the man you come to ask questions of. It is Ricky White, and it is his story that you will be hearing. He lives in Midland, Texas, is in the oil supplying business, and is very brave in my estimation to be here and submit to all the questions. Next is his wife, Patricia, who has been deeply involved in this story for several years. She has shared the secrets that her husband has had, and we welcome her. On the end is John Stockwell. He is a former CIA agent, an author of a best-selling book on Angola and the CIA, and he is here to give his opinion on certain cables that were sent to Roscoe White prior to the assassination of President Kennedy. Before turning this session over to Gary Shaw, I would just like to say that what you're about to hear is the Ricky White story. It is not the story of the center. Ricky White came to us and asked for help. We've attempted to give him as much help as we can. We've gone out and verified as much of his story as private citizens can. But this is not a solution to the John Kennedy case. The information we think is quite important and we think it's true. But even if everything that's said here today checks out on further investigation, this case is not solved. We still will not know who planned it, who paid for it, and basically what the shooting was about. The most we can hope to get out of this is an idea of who the actual assassins were. And you can talk to Ricky White, and if you look in your press kit, you'll see a number of items that do relate to this. But again, this is not the story of this center. It is Ricky White's story, and we have been very pleased to assist him in getting it made public. I'd now like to turn this over to Gary Shaw, who will give you a brief synopsis of what the story is about.
Thank you very much. Let me too express my appreciation for being here. I'm going to give you a quick overview of this story. Those of you who are with the press have a synopsis and a chronology in your kit, as well as other information that we'll be talking about. Let me just give you a quick overview. Roscoe Anthony White became a Marine in the late 1950s. He enlisted and stayed with them until 1962. After leaving the Marines, he came to the Dallas, Texas area, and in September of 1963, Roscoe White's wife went to work for Jack Ruby at Carousel Club as a rail girl. She worked there for about 3 weeks. In your press kit was a photograph of Jack Ruby and Geneva White. Also a photograph of Roscoe and Geneva at about that same time, so that you can see both the family and friends have identified this photograph and Geneva herself as being a picture of her with Jack Ruby during her time of employment. In September of 1963, Roscoe White, or Rock, as he was commonly known, went to work for the Dallas Police Department, October 7, 1963. He worked for the department for 2 years, until October 17, 1965. At that time, he left the department. Of course, in November of 1963, the assassination occurred. A brief 6 weeks after he went to work as a rookie Dallas policeman, the president was killed in the streets of downtown Dallas. In September 1971, Roscoe White was killed in a tragic industrial accident. He was burnt to death, and he did so after some very suspicious circumstances that we'll relate a little bit later on. In 1975, the widow of Roscoe White was robbed, burglarized and robbed in her home in Paris, Texas. The items taken from her home were a multitude of assassination-related photographs that had been in the possession of her husband. Those are displayed for you over here in this case, if you get time later on. One of these photographs became very famous because the Schweiker Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, helped retrieve these photographs from the burglars, and one of them that they found was a third Oswald backyard photograph that was publicized widely throughout the United States. It's the first time that particular photograph was ever released, and it was in the possession of Roscoe White. After that, the FBI came in and did some questioning. A lot of things happened that we'll be talking about in the question and answer period to follow. In 1978, at the time of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, a lot of publicity about the Kennedy killing was in the newspapers. A longtime family friend and friend of Roscoe White's came to Ricky White, with whom this story is all about, and told him, "Ricky, this new committee is probably going to announce that your father was involved in the assassination." He took it as you would expect, like any of you would, with disbelief, with shock, some emotional turmoil, and he left it at that. It was not until 1982, when his grandfather died in Paris, Texas, that the family, he was the remaining occupant of a particular household, and the family gathered at this household after the funeral and began, as they usually do, dispersing family artifacts and going through the things to take to the different families involved. And they found in a storage building Roscoe White's footlocker from the Marine Corps. Of course, Ricky began immediately to pour through that. In that footlocker were many items, some of which we'll talk about later also, but particularly one particular item, a diary or a journal of his father's, beginning with his Marine Corps employment up through and until about 3 weeks prior to his death. he detailed his activities, both in the military and afterwards. And it was quite a shock to this young man when he saw in his father's own handwriting of his participation in the killing of John Kennedy. Briefly, that participation was this: working with Jack Ruby and others, two men particularly as other gunmen, himself being one, firing from the fence in Dealey Plaza, killed the President of the United States. He details his escape from Dealey Plaza by going back over the railroad tracks down to his waiting automobile near Stemmons Freeway, which was a white 1962 Ford Galaxy, sped away to the Oak Cliff area where he rendezvoused with J.D. Tippett, who was a family friend and also a fellow police officer at that time. The two of them then picked up Lee Harvey Oswald, who was also involved somehow in this plot. His exact activities are not detailed, but it is stated that he did not fire a shot that day. As they were driving, and the plans were to get Oswald to Red Bird Field for escape, Oswald panicked, according to the diary, fled from the car. At this time, J.D. Tippett, Officer Tippett, who was not cognizant of the details of the plot in any way, also said, "Rock, something's going on. I'm going to have to take you in." At that time, Rock killed J.D. Tippett, fled from the scene to a parking lot, and later disappeared. Of course, on November 24th, 1963, Jack Ruby shoots Lee Oswald in the basement of the Dallas City Hall. That just happened to be Ricky White's birthday, and they were having a birthday party. His father comes in quickly and says, "We've got to leave town." And then he sends the family to Paris, Texas, and he disappears for about 4 days. That was in 1963 that occurred. In 1982 that he found the diary and read this. Later on, the diary also detailed about a lockbox in the Dallas bank. In about 1988, Ricky goes to the Midland, Texas District Attorney's office to get that district attorney to help him or assist him in opening or finding and opening that particular lockbox detailed in the diary. The district attorney got nervous about the situation and called in the FBI. The FBI came to Ricky's house, demanded he bring all of his materials, follow them to the federal building or the building in which their offices were there in Midland, interrogated him for about 5 hours about all of the materials he had, including the diary. He was allowed to go home after that, box up all of his materials, including the diary, and go home. A short while after he got home, very emotionally distraught, lying on the bed in his bedroom, but there came another knock at the door. It was FBI agent Tom Ferris who came back, he says, to retrieve his notebook, which he left in Ricky's box. He retrieved it and said thank you. 3 or 4 days later, when they went to look for the diary was gone. Ricky Vegas told a very continuous and complete story of this, consistent throughout all of this, about what the diary related. This was in 1988. The diary also spoke of a couple of other items. One, and we found some very cryptic notes in order to find this, is that he had secreted away, Roscoe White had secreted away certain materials related to the assassination. About 2 months ago, after a search of several locations, this was found by Ricky. A steel container containing several things. One, news clippings that would identify the contents as having been related to the Kennedy assassination. Negatives of family photographs that would then be identified only to Roscoe White and his family. A dog tag from his Marine Corps giving his serial number, date of birth, etc. And also 3 very important cables, very aged but very specific. These cables detailed his activities and his orders relating to the assassination of President Kennedy. One it appears from it faded and it cannot be completely read. August of 1963, it states simply that with his serial number and his code name, which was in the diary, which was Mandarin, we'll put that down. It states very specifically that his foreign assignments are canceled. Next assignment will be the elimination of a threat to worldwide peace. The destinations would be Austin, Houston, or Dallas, and further orders would be forthcoming. Second cable, and you can read all of these, they're on display over here, and also in your packet. The second orders were the destination is Dallas, and that his assignment was to be within the department, meaning the Dallas Police Department. The third cable was December 1963, and stated stay hidden within the department. Witnesses have eyes, ears, and mouths. A group will be in to clean up misleading evidence and recover up again at that particular time. Very significant with these cables, at the bottom of them is the term RE rifle. Ricky had already told us before we found the cables that his father worked for the RE rifle group. Down at the bottom is RE rifle and destroy. In other words, destroy these cables upon receipt. That becomes very significant because Roscoe died in 1971. It was not until 1975 that the American public learned that this country, CIA, our intelligence agency, had an executive action program. The executive action program was to assassinate foreign leaders. That's all specified, and it's in your kit, the documents. This became known as the Church Committee or the Senate Select Committee on the alleged assassination plots of foreign leaders. So the rifle program was in effect. Executive action was called, that was the word used by the CIA, but their code name was ZR Rifle, or Rifle Program, for this assassination apparatus. So it's significant that these cables, buried prior to 1971, have this on them. These cables are very important. We don't know where this will lead exactly, but I'm going to ask each one of these gentlemen here who have had a part in uncovering some of the things and corroborating some of the things about this case to speak, each of them. And I think I will start with Larry Harris, who's been a long-time researcher, especially in the Tippit murder, and make some application to that particular event. Larry Harris.
Good morning. Just very briefly as background on part of the evolution of this story. I was contacted by phone in March 1989 by Ricky Don White. He told me that his father had been a Dallas policeman at the time of the assassination. He died in 1971, and Ricky was still quite young. And he was trying to find out more about his father. Ricky had an associate, a co-worker, who was assisting him in this effort at that time. They came and visited with me, and they were particularly interested in anything I knew about Roscoe White, and the extent of my knowledge about that was that he had been the source of the third photograph of Oswald, which had surfaced in 1975. And they were particularly interested in the murder of Officer Tippit and a photograph that purports to show a man in a Dallas police uniform firing. This photograph was taken during the assassination. And they did not tell me very much at that point. I think they were just kind of feeling me out. Several weeks later, they called me again and came over and we talked further. And Ricky began to tell me a little bit about his father, his father's career in the Marines with Lee Oswald. He told me his mother worked for Jack Ruby in September 1963. And that he had found his father's diary in 1982 and had been startled about the contents. He didn't elaborate at this point. He told me that he had reason to believe his father had knowledge of the assassination. And on our third visit, Ricky told me that, in a very emotional way, that he was pretty certain that his father had had a role in the assassination, and had in fact probably been one of the gunmen. He related the incident to me about a former intelligence operative who told him in 1978 that his father had been involved, and that that information might be made public by the House Select Committee on Assassinations. My role in meeting with Ricky during that period was to, I guess, serve as a sounding board and give him a little feedback, some comments about what he was telling me. I was suggesting people he could talk to. I was suggesting he use the Federal Freedom of Information Act to find out more about his father and his father's military career. Late 1989, I didn't hear from Ricky for a while, and he had tried to make the story public through other avenues, which were not successful. Finally, earlier this year, he called me again, and during our meetings, I had been skeptical initially, but intrigued also. And over the meetings, over the period of months in 1989, I became increasingly intrigued, and I felt that this boy had something, but I wasn't sure what it was. So when he contacted me again earlier this year, I suggested that we go talk to Gary Shaw down here at the JFK Center. We did. Subsequently, Joe West was brought in from Houston to assist, and Larry Howard, our director and president here at the center. And we formed a team which went to work on this story in probably March of this year, and we've worked on it pretty steady since then. And it culminated in early June of this year when Ricky deciphered the written code left by his father and found the steel container in Paris, Texas. And that was when it peaked for us, and that's the reason we're here today. I've been asked to speak very briefly about the murder of Officer Tippit, because that is an area of research that I specialized in back in the late 1970s. The murder of Patrolman Tippit on November 22nd was overshadowed by the President's death to such an extent that it has been virtually relegated to footnote status in history. In fact, when Congress reopened the investigation in the late 1970s, their final report devoted a scant 3 paragraphs to the Tippit murder, and that was just citing the old tired Warren Commission evidence from 1964. Yet Tippit's death remains an enigma to serious researchers and students of the assassination. On the surface, it appeared to represent an open and shut case against Lee Harvey Oswald. But the official case, to those who have studied it, does not withstand close scrutiny. And researchers have long been appalled by the lack of meaningful and credible evidence against Lee Harvey Oswald, not only in the assassination, but certainly the Tippit murder. The truth of the matter is, we don't know exactly what transpired over at 10th and Patton Streets in the Oak Cliff section of Dallas on that day. Accounts of the shooting varied wildly, as did descriptions of the suspect in the Tippit shooting. The account given by Ricky Don White, based on his father's diary, is consistent with the known facts in the Tippit murder. I find nothing in Ricky's account that discredits or contradicts the basic facts and evidence in the Tippit murder. Some of the more interesting parallels are these. The diary, according to Ricky, Rock met up with Officer Tippit. He entered Tippit's patrol car and they proceeded to 1026 North Beckley, where Oswald rented a room. The fact is, Earlene Roberts, the housekeeper there at 1026 North Beckley, testified to the Warren Commission that while Oswald was in his room briefly, around 1 p.m., a Dallas police car with 2 men in it pulled up in front of the rooming house. The horn was sounded twice, and the car drove away. She looked out the window a few minutes later and observed Oswald standing there at the curb in front of the house. She described it as if he were waiting for someone who was standing there on the curb. According to Ricky, the diary stated that Oswald was not the killer of Officer Tippit. The fact is that researchers have long known that Lee Harvey Oswald could not have been the killer of Officer Tippit. First and foremost, Tippit was slain 1 mile from Oswald's rooming house, and Oswald could not possibly have traversed that mile on foot, as the Warren Commission said he did, based on the known time constraints established by the Warren Commission. He could not possibly have reached the scene in time to commit the shooting. According to Ricky, the diary stated that Roscoe White shot Officer Tippit with a 45 caliber automatic handgun, which had been modified to fire 38 caliber bullets. The facts are: the second description of the suspect in the Tippit murder to go out over the police radio stated that the suspect is armed with a dark finish automatic pistol. Less than 5 minutes later, a Dallas police sergeant at the scene went on the police radio and notified the dispatcher, quote, "The shells at the scene indicate the suspect is armed with a 38 caliber automatic rather than a revolver." And Lee Harvey Oswald, when he was arrested, was carrying a 6-shot revolver, not an automatic handgun, or two completely different types of handguns. The shells submitted into evidence to the Warren Commission by the Dallas Police Department were the only physical evidence linking Oswald and Oswald's gun to the Tippit murder. And we have two strong indications here that those shells that were found were automatics, and the shells submitted into evidence were for a 6-shot revolver. And that was the shells were the only evidence linking Oswald to the crime. Shells recovered at the scene were almost certainly not the shells submitted into evidence. And incidentally, 4 bullets removed from Tippit's body during the autopsy could not be traced to Lee Harvey Oswald's revolver. You could look it up, it's in the Warren Commission. According to the diary, Roscoe, after Oswald became alarmed and left the car, Rock and Tippit remained in the car, and Tippit became suspicious, somewhat alarmed, and told Roscoe that they were going to have to go downtown and straighten this out. Roscoe stated in his diary he could not permit that to happen and jeopardize the plan. The fact is, the House Select Committee on Assassinations located a witness named Jack Tatum, and this was back in 1978. In fact, Earl Goals and myself interviewed Jack Tatum about a week before the investigators for the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And Jack Tatum gave a very graphic account of how, after the killer shot Officer Tippit, Tippit fell in the street, and the gunman walked around behind Tippit's patrol car to the other side and took very careful and deliberate aim and fired one more shot into Tippit's body. The House Select Committee's final report made this note on this incident. This is a quote from their final report. "This action, which is often encountered in gangland murders and is commonly described as a coup de grace, is more indicative of an execution than an act of defense intended to allow escape or prevent apprehension. Absent further evidence, which the committee did not develop, the meaning of this evidence must remain uncertain." The fact is, Roscoe White was a professional assassin, and this separate, deliberate shot, the coup de grace, is consistent with the actions of a professional assassin, not a novice like Lee Harvey Oswald. Finally, the diary stated that Officer Tippit was not involved in the plot, that it was a chance encounter with Roscoe, whom he knew. He may have been doing a favor, but he was an unwitting participant, not a part of the plot. The fact is, in 1978 and 79, I delved very deeply into Officer Tippit's background, his police career, his personal life, far more extensively than either the Warren Commission or the House Select Committee had done. And I came away convinced that, contrary to years of speculation and rumors and innuendo, J.D. Tippit was not the kind of individual who would knowingly participate in a plot or agree to participate in a plot against the President of the United States. And I'm real confident of that J.D. Tippit was not a plotter. Again, I found nothing in Ricky White's account that is inconsistent with or contradicts the known facts in the Tippit murder. In closing, let me say this. Irregardless of the passage of time, the assassination of an American head of state cannot remain shrouded in doubt, mystery, and controversy. Yet after a quarter century, that remains the legacy of the Kennedy assassination. The historical record of this case is inaccurate and incomplete. And this nation's historical integrity is not intact as long as a crime of this magnitude remains unresolved. 27 years of official deceit and secrecy is enough. It's time, once and for all, to get to the bottom of John Kennedy's murder. And when Ricky Don White stepped forward to tell his story, I think we may very well have taken a significant stride in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. I'll now ask Joe H. West, private investigator.
I'm a private investigator licensed by the state of Texas, and also a certified legal investigator certified by the National Association of Legal Investigators. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I'm not employed by or I'm associated with any police or sheriff's department, any state law enforcement agency, the United States Justice Department, the FBI, or the CIA. I'm a private investigator who's given 17 months of my time, full-time, night and day, investigating for one reason: to find out who fired the shots in Dealey Plaza on November the 22nd, 1963. I've investigated now full-time, 17 months, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, taking affidavits that are sworn and witnessed, tape recording statements of many people, filing facts and information in a secure place that hopefully one day can be taken into a court of law and bring to justice the men who were involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. 17 months of searching for the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The evidence that I've gathered concludes beyond any reasonable doubt that there was a firing squad in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963. Beyond a reasonable doubt that Roscoe Anthony White was one of the members of that firing squad. And thirdly, that there was a death squad sent out in a witness elimination program that includes 5 men, most of them who are still alive today. My investigation of Roscoe Anthony White includes interviewing and tape recording Ricky Don White on May the 31st of this year, having 2 hours of his complete story to be preserved for history. Secondly, taking a 6-page sworn and witnessed affidavit of the facts that he knew that involved his father in this assassination. Thirdly, taking an 8mm movie film to Denver, the only place in the world that can process film of 8mm K11 quality that's 26 years old, hoping and hoping and hoping that something would be there that would be further evidence of that assassination. But terrestrial radiation and time exposure caused the film not to show any images on it. Fourthly, locating and interviewing Jack Shaw, the first and most important of all the witnesses revealed to me by Ricky was his pastor in the months prior to the death of his father. Jack Shaw, on my far left, became one of the most helpful workers and has given some of the best of the efforts of work to obtain evidence in this case. He was at the bedside of Roscoe Anthony White to hear his last words prior to his death, and had counseled with him a few months prior to his death to know something of the double life that Roscoe Anthony White had lived and some of the things involved in his life of assassinations. And then later, working very closely with Jack Shaw, he very helpfully worked with the mother, Geneva, the mother of Ricky, the wife of Roscoe, in helping to find additional and further information to fill in some of the gaps of things that Ricky was unable to know. Fifthly, in attempting to secure or to open a security box in a bank here in Dallas that was believed to be owned and filled with items by his father. Sixthly, searching for the hidden container of evidence, first with a pick and shovel, and lastly, I say this almost humorously, with an industrial backhoe, tearing up more country than we were able to put back together. Still unable to find it, in the middle of the night, Ricky was able to remember a code through the help of his mother, a formula to help him discover where that container was. He brought it immediately to me. It is now in storage in a very secure vault in Houston, being preserved to hopefully one day we can take it into a courtroom as evidence of what happened in Dealey Plaza. Seventh, searching for and discovering the existence of a witness elimination book that still needs very further research and investigation to determine the facts that are found in it. Eighth, interviewing a person in Austin, Texas who owns the safe house at Dripping Springs in which Roscoe White went 2 days following the assassination, and the owner of that safe house told me personally that he held in his hand the cartridges of the shells that were fired in Dealey Plaza. And he's alive today. We need to investigate him further. Ninth, interviewing Geneva, the mother of Ricky, and taking her affidavit as to her knowledge of the involvement of Roscoe Anthony White. 10th, of taking 2 affidavits from Jack Shaw, who has been so very helpful to record for the record of history all of the things that have been told to him by Geneva about the involvement of Roscoe Anthony White. 11th, interviewing Marina Oswald. I showed her pictures of Roscoe White to see if she knew him, had ever seen him, or ever talked with him. And she says she does not know him and that she has never seen him to her knowledge in her lifetime. She is being as helpful as she can in this investigation. Also interviewing family members, some who are present here today, friends of Roscoe White, associates of Roscoe White, and acquaintances of Roscoe White. Also performing myself a voice stress analysis on Ricky's 2-hour interview that I conducted with him, and I determined from my experience that Ricky was telling the truth in everything that he recorded on that audio tape. Also, taking Ricky to be given a polygraph test in which the polygraph test turned out to be positive, and Ricky telling the truth about these things that he has recorded with me and others of his knowledge of his father. Because of time, and each one of us was not to take as long as time has been taking, I'm going to only say that if you have any questions further about this investigation, I'll answer them later.
to announce in just a few minutes. I'm going to call on Reverend Jack White now, who took the statement. Jack Shaw.
I guess it's apparent that y'all want to hear from Ricky. Maybe I should just make an opening remark or two and sit down. Let me clarify something for you. First of all, I'm not a licensed or certified psychologist. I am a pastoral counselor, and I'm the founder of Relationship Enrichment Counseling Center here in Dallas. I was visited by Ricky about a year ago with another man, and they asked me if I had any knowledge about Ricky's father's background, to which I responded at that time. If I did, I was not willing to talk about it. I didn't feel comfortable with the two men in the room, and it wasn't Ricky that I was uncomfortable with, but I did not talk. I did say to Ricky at the time, after he told me that his mother was very ill, I said, your mother has a lot more information than she knows or you know, and at some point, if you want to pursue that, I'd be happy to entertain the possibility of talking to her father. About a year later, he and Joe West came to my office. I felt very comfortable with Joe, and I agreed to go and visit with Geneva for the first time. I understand over the period of years she had some 4 shock treatments, and I'm not here to debate the issue of what shock treatments do to an individual. I am here to tell you that on the first meeting, Geneva and I spent several hours together. She got up out of her chair, she walked across the room to get some water from the kitchen. She turned around and she said, oh my God, I cannot believe that I remembered that. And at that point, the whole ball of wax started coming out. I mean, it started rolling out. She started remembering things, and I would say this, that the first thing she remembered was a meeting with a man in New Orleans. She later identified that gentleman. At this point, I'm not going to give his name, but she has identified him in the picture. She's identified some other people. I will tell you that at this point, when that man from New Orleans spoke to her, he told her many things about her husband, but the main thing he did is he brought to her remembrance many things from her past that the shock treatments had not erased. She went to work for Jack Ruby. She was there for a particular purpose, which she found out. She overheard a conversation between her husband and Jack Ruby. In that conversation, she heard the plot, the entire plot of the assassination of the President of the United States that was coming. 4 months later, she was given shock treatment. She was given a shot and kept sedated until January 1964. And she lived with the knowledge, heavily sedated, that her husband was involved in something very bizarre. She struggled with what to do with it. She was told in no uncertain terms that evening by Jack Ruby that if she opened her mouth, she was dead and her children were dead. She offered to take her life that night in the restaurant or in his place of business. They agreed that she would have shock treatments and that through shock treatments she would be silenced. When the man in New Orleans met her and told her of these events in I believe it was late 1970, when he told her all the things he knew about her husband, these things began to come to remembrance. She went home and she confronted her husband with those events. He spilled his guts that night. He told her everything. There are a lot of other events that I'm very privy to. I have many hours of tapes that are locked and vault, very safe. I've done affidavits. And I'm here to tell you that there's a lot of stuff that blow your mind. Thank you.
Very quickly and very importantly, one of the men who has assisted us is John Stockwell, a former CIA agent, who has carefully, personally examined the cables that are secreted away by Roscoe White. John?
Good morning. I think we should note that Ricky asked us variously to spell out the background and history and chronology of this thing so that he could just get into the question and answer, which is coming very soon. I will not talk for long. I was brought in because of my CIA experience in 3 of its secret wars, my dealing with CIA mercenaries and paramilitary officers in those wars, and my 13 years of lecturing and writing about the history of CIA covert operations. I looked at these documents, the cables over here, which is where the heart of the significance of what we found here, I think, the greatest significance of what we found here is the fact that if all of this checks out, when we have scientific analysis of all the documents and every element of the story, we've checked it as far as we possibly can, and it checked so far to us that we wouldn't be here today. But if it does check out, what we've got here, even people who saw a conspiracy, as the House Committee did in 1979, had said that it involved probably the CIA, the Mafia, and Cuban exile elements in Florida, but renegades. Now, if this is the rifle program, the ZR rifle program, that was formed an ultra-secret office of the CIA by William Harvey, who was head of the Cuba desk, who supervised the JM Wave Station in Florida. It was approved by Bissell, the director of operations, and had to have been approved by Allen Dulles, the director of the CIA. So we would have an ultra-secret office here going right up to the director that was involved in killing the president. This is what's, to me, the most significant single element of what we find. However, there are innumerable fascinating and very important details that you can get to now. Among the information that we found here is the ZR rifle. This unit, Rock himself, involved in missions apparently killing 8 people before the presidential assassination, and apparently he and the others with him killing 28 witnesses, plus evidence perhaps another 28 witnesses after that. Now I think it's time for you to start asking Ricky questions as you will. Yes, sir.
We've seen a lot of the evidence, had a chance to review it. What's the motive in your estimation of why your father and his others were recruited by your story to assassinate President Kennedy?
I think Gary Shaw would have to answer that question for you.
I don't think that you can find a motive in a diary. It wasn't given. The cable was very specific. The elimination of a threat to worldwide peace.
Jerry, what should you have seen studying this diary to verify your story inside yourself?
Only it's something that I would not share with anybody else besides myself. I've been asked that several times. It's something that you don't take down to your next door neighbors and let them read, take it to the front of the public and let them read. What was in that diary is very personal to my family, which I would even today share it to myself. I wouldn't share it to the outsiders because it's a part of my father that I didn't know. I knew a man that was a whole lot a different person, a man that I loved and treasured. He was a very equal man to me, and I do respect him.
Ricky, what do you stand to gain out of this?
I haven't gained anything yet at this time. I'm not saying I'm going to, but at this time I've researched it since 1982 or 1985. And I haven't gained anything out of the story at this time.
What is your motive for this?
Ma'am?
Where else have you gone with this story? What other experts have you talked with?
These are the only experts that I've talked with, but we have talked with Viking International on writing a book about a year ago.
Oh, what's the status of the book?
It was put on hold.
But you went several times.
No, sir, they did not. I contacted the publishing company because the gentleman that I was working with at the time was trying to make it into his story and putting fabrication into the story. put a halt to it, because if this story is going to be told, it's going to be told right. No fabrication, no cops and robbers. I'm here to tell a story about my father and strictly his involvement.
I'd like you to tell us in your own words what your father
I believe I could answer that to you in front of all these people. I've never gave a personal interview with this many people. I'd love to. I'm very nervous at this time. I'd love to sit down with you one-on-one, answer all your questions, and tell you just like I told these gentlemen. I apologize if you feel like that I'm not trying to cooperate with you, but I'm trying as best I can.
What's your brother think about
My brother is deeply, to give his point of view, is deeply behind me. Unfortunately, he didn't have the involvement and the motivation that I had. And when I sunk my time into it, it was strictly in the time of my father's death. It was very abnormal. It gave me the motivation, and through that is where I found out the other. Yes, sir.
Mr. White, we've heard from the other people what happened when you found the diary. Can you recount finding the diary, what you read in it, and maybe some of your thoughts on what went through your mind at that time?
I can answer that to you on the fact that when I found the diary, that it was a shocking, most incredible thing that one individual in this room could ever think. Because this guy never gave the impression of being a bad guy, being involved in anything. Even though that I knew that my family was in the House Select Committee, and they came down through John Doe, through my experience, through my research. It's been a hard road to tell you.
What in that diary did you find most startling, and how do you know that it wasn't your father's diary?
Because in the diary it states his name and his military number. And I had to take letters that we have now to correspond with his handwriting, that it was definitely his diary, it was his words. I knew the man. I know that y'all are taking one man's word on a diary that doesn't exist, but I'm an individual that will tell you the truth. And I'm here to tell you the truth, and unably, through complications, that I don't have the diary. No, sir, I haven't, for the same fact that in May of '88, the FBI scared me so bad that I completely dropped my father's investigation.
You want your father as a bad guy now? How do you feel?
No, I think my father's, I don't think of him as a bad person. There's a lot of people out there that might think that, and you might think it too. But my father was an individual that I loved and deeply admired, even today.
How do you feel about what he did, if that's all true,
He was told by our government to do so. That would be just like you being in the Vietnam War and they handed you a rifle to take that hill. You don't question the government.
What is your father's diary? Where was he standing exactly? In other words, which direction did the fatal shot come from? Behind, front, back, and all the way?
I'd be glad to walk down there and show you, but I would rather not tell you to be specific at this time.
What's the better time to tell him?
Okay, my father was standing behind the picket fence, right of the tree.
Grassy knoll?
Yes, sir.
How many shots did he fire?
2 shots.
Did anybody else?
There were 2 other men that were in the buildings. There were 6 shots fired totally in David Plaza.
From the book depository?
2 came from the book depository, which his name was Lebanon. The man in the record building was Saul. That was shot 2 shots, 6 shots fired total.
Was Oswald one?
Oswald was not one of the gunmen in David Plaza. A photograph in the Philippines of 1958 that was taken from the White family that is a display in your packet. The fact that my mother had seen my father at the rifle range with Oswald. His military record shows that he was in the same platoon of the U-2 flights in Russia.
Ricky, did your father have on a police uniform on the day?
I do not know what my father was wearing that day. It does not specificate what he was wearing. but he did have the availability to a police uniform.
Anybody check the record to see if he was on duty, an officer on duty at the time?
He was supposed to be in the area.
What circumstances did your father live that are so suspicious?
In 1971, my father was working at M&M Equipment Company, was a welder, had gone on a break for 15 minutes, and returned, went back to work, had picked up a acetylene torch, and the hoses had been cut. The room had time to fill with acetylene. He ignited it, and it exploded in front of him. There was a gas can from Aero Chemical that was placed up under the welding table that he was not aware of, which was a secondary explosion that burnt my father, 99% of his body, third-degree burns. Lived for 26 hours. It was the worst time of my life.
Did the diary identify any of the other participants?
Strictly, the diary related the men, how they got into the building, and how they got out. It doesn't reciprocate in the names of these men.
Ricky, you may not know the answer to this.
Strictly code names. My father was Manry the Grassino assassin. Lebanon was in the book depository. Saul was in the records building.
Did your father fire the shot or did
He was one of 3 men that fired shots. Kennedy was hit 3 times, 1 in the back from the book depository, 2 from the front, from the grassy knoll. My father had shot a throat shot and the fatal head wound.
Did the Zapruder film not show this?
Sir,
Did he describe that in the diary?
never said that it was the fatal head wound, just strictly that he did fire 2 shots, both entering Kennedy from the front. 1 entered through the throat area, and the other was in the top frontal area.
Did the Zapruder film not show this? Did it or did it not?
Sir,
Did the Zapruder film show this or did it not? And if so, why not?
Gary, would you answer that for these men?
Simply to say that the Zapruder film is consistent with a shot from the front. Everyone has known that for a number of years.
Sean, as long as you're up there, how do you square grassy knoll period back 3 separate occasions within the last 20 years, 22 years I should say, 3 separate teams of forensic pathologists examined the autopsy pictures, including 1 prominent critic of the wound report. All of them, without exception, have included all the shots that came from the rear.
I'd answer that simply by saying that they're working with very tainted evidence. The fact of the matter is that the back wound that they say exists was never probed, never followed. They said the back wound came out the throat. Missing from the National Archives and from their inspection are the tissue slides of that supposed exit wound. All of the doctors and officials who examined the body at Parkland Hospital said that that was a wound of entrance. One doctor said, I performed a tracheostomy over that penetration wound, 1 inch to 1 1/4 inch incision. When that body, the president's body, got into the hands of the autopsist in Bethesda, Maryland, that 1 1/4 inch incision had become a 3 1/4 inch gaping gash. That's what they saw at the autopsy up there. There is no exit wound, but that's not unreasonable either. You can say definitely all you want to, but if you examine Martin Luther King, who was shot in the neck, the bullet was retrieved from the spinal column, the hard tissue, and the bone in the spine.
What do you think happened to Old Cliff when his father shot him? What happened there?
I think that Mary Harris has done a fine job of describing that incident on 10th and Path. I know that my father had to live with that for the rest of his life because J.D. Tippett was a close friend of my father's.
What did the diary say about how the men had gotten into the building and how they got out?
Lebanon worked for an air conditioning crew that was working on the building at the time. Saul was working for the janitorial service of Dallas, Texas.
Rick,
Ricky,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Slay, your dad's diary when he became involved in covert operations?
I'm just familiar with the training that he went through in the Philippines and the transactions that he took in Taiwan, Philippines at the
Was
time.
that training extra than the regular military?
Correct. Yes, ma'am. They left on the same ship in 1957, docked in the Philippines at Cedar Point, and then was part of a mission of the U-2 flights that flew over Russia.
Is there any diaries that your dad was wondering why this, why he was being ordered to kill the president?
Like I said, he never mentions any other names in the diary, but strictly his code name Mandarin, the code name Lebanon, and Saul.
But did he indicate any reason why, or any question in his mind about being given such an assignment?
He never goes into his own words on his thoughts on the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Who did your father specifically work for?
I do not know that at this time. We are now in the process of researching that. Yes, sir.
Another thing, a friend who told you about his involvement, what intelligence agency did he work for?
I do not know that at this time.
And one more question, and if you got that before his way, so man, there'd be a lot more stuff on this.
Okay.
A lot more information. Have you ever been treated for any behavioral problems?
I've never had any problems.
Yeah.
I believe that I'm just as honest as any person sitting in this room. I would not be standing here telling you a story that has all the corroboration to it and all the incidences to it. If I was standing up here telling you a story and I didn't have anything, you could doubt me.
You mentioned back in 1988, the FBI threatened you this morning.
They never had threatened me, but they did carry me in and interrogated me for 5 hours. Yes,
This
ma'am.
morning you appeared rather emotional at times in your
Yes.
discussion. Are
Yes,
you still
it's-
having a hard time
Yeah,
dealing with this?
it's eating me apart. I mean, I'm sharing a story with you that's built up inside of me because I love the man that you are telling about. There is no doubt in my mind. Yes.
We are very hopeful that the Texas Attorney General will investigate this case as opposed to the federal government. We've had 27 years, and to this day, are still supporting the Warren Commission. They simply won't believe that it's not a true story. So we're going to take all this material to the State Attorney General. We're very hopeful that he will open an official investigation in enough muscle to get to the bottom.
Have you had any contact with you?
I spoke with him some months ago before we came across this material. Yes, but we didn't really have anything at that time that would warrant his cooperation. But I am hopeful that we will get this.
What type of investigation ultimately?
We're hopeful that it will lead to who is behind this plot. As I said earlier, this is not a solution to the Kennedy assassination. It merely facts that point you in a particular direction. But private citizens can't carry this thing any further.
Mr. Shaw, a question for you. You alluded to this at the top, but your assessment as to why the CIA was working in conjunction with the mafia on this whole thing, it just seems to me incredible that they would do that, and this is really the evidence that you're pointing out. Why is that the case?
We didn't point that evidence out. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, looking into assassination plots on foreign leaders, pointed that out very plainly in 1975. William Harvey was running the ZR rifle program. He had hired Robert Mayhew, a former Chicago FBI man, men like Sam Giancana, Johnny Rosselli, Charles Nicoletti, et al. And were very active in assassination plots, especially as it related to Cuba and Castro.
But why? What did they have to do?
You didn't have to go back to the politics of that day. They wanted Cuba back, period. It was a Las Vegas off the coast of Florida for the mafia figures. They had their narcotics, their prostitution, their gambling, and all had been taken away by Fidel Castro. Now, the assassinations were directed in that manner. And when John Stockton probably needs to talk about this, but let me just say quickly that the CIA, organized crime, and Cuban exiles were all working actively in assassination. This has all been confirmed, not by us, but by investigations by
My
government.
question for you, Mr. Stockton, will follow up on that. What did the CIA have to gain in eliminating the President of the United States?
Well, this is what I wanted to step forward to help her articulate a lecture on the subject. I read, I'm writing a book on it right now. By the fall of 1963, there was a great energy wave, negative energy towards President Kennedy. The CIA, of course, felt that he had betrayed them in the Bay of the Pigs. They lamented the fact that he'd cut a deal with Khrushchev to withdraw the missiles and never to invade Cuba. The CIA, speaking in terms of the CIJN wave and Cuban exile people down in Florida, they wanted to go in and invade and take Cuba back. So they were curious. The mob, of course, was literally in battle. The President and Bobby Kennedy were fighting to put them in jail and throw them out of the country. The leaders of the mafia, open warfare. Kennedy had cut the oil depletion allowances. Conservative businessmen were making a lot of money for this. Were very angry. The military-industrial complex, as President Eisenhower called it, had decided that there should be a war against the communists in Vietnam, and he had just in the weeks before this point decided to pull back from Vietnam. He had started his tentative civil rights program in the South, where the rednecks and the KKK, mind you, this was at the height of segregation, and they were enraged at the thought of what he planned to do in the South. Adding this all together, you come up with a tremendous, and I'm not speculating, across the South, across the nation, across Florida, quotes, threats, statements he would be killed, plots to kill him, people saying that they were going to do it with a rifle and set up a patsy, known plots, as well as a great deal of rage focused on this man. Colonel Fletcher Prouty says that the rage was so pervasive that people were plotting to kill him. They just had to lift the protection and let it happen. It could have happened in Houston or Boston or Dallas or Miami. It happened that the conditions were right, and it did, in fact, happen in Dallas. I hope it helps you.
Didn't Kennedy say that he was going to reorganize the CIA and came back down?
Well, he had definitely threatened after the Bay of Pigs, where he was burned so bad, to break it apart and everything, but then he had turned around and fallen in love with it. And he and Bobby Kennedy, they had the Opie Mongoose War going against Fidel, and they were young and full of beans and very much into the action that the CIA offered them. But they were moving to close down all of the various unapproved or semi-approved Cuban exile CIA activities across Florida. They had the Customs Office, the FBI in some cases going in and closing down training camps. And these people were running raids into Cuba. They were practiced in shooting, ambushing, and killing people, frustrated that they had not been able to kill Fidel Castro. And apparently the energy turned back towards Kennedy, whom they saw as the greater threat to their chance of ever, in fact, getting back into Cuba. I'll step aside after this one question. The CIA, remember these documents, and before you leave, remember we've got this all laid out in pictures of the canister and photographs and the documents and the cables that he received ordering him apparently to do this, and they say Navy intelligence ahead of time. You notice in the Austin American Statesman yesterday, Admiral Inman said that these documents do not look like ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence, formal communications, and I agree with him. But if this was the ZR rifle program, as the slug at the bottom of those things indicate, then this was an out of the office, a field cover run by the contract paramilitary officers, and we do know that the CIA and the OSS in World War II and the CIA since used Navy cover for a wide variety of sensitive operations, including, for example, the MK Ultra program where they experimented on disease and drugs with people, citizens in this country. So yes, it's very possible, but something that would have to be confirmed, that ZR rifle was using Navy intelligence as cover for the communications to a field agent like Roscoe White. I'm 29 years old. I'll be 30 years old
ago, November 24th, 1960. I am employed by Monster Corporation and have been employed in the oil field all the way up until the day I started this.
What do you do with that?
What I do for a living? I've been helping Joe West, Gary Shaw, Larry Harris to be able to prove to them the facts that I have been able to, for these guys to come forward and tell you.
What do you do to make a living?
I'm being paid by Matsu Corporation they had backed this. I went to them on the ideal of having an ideal of letting me investigate my father's involvement in the Kennedy assassination. They were willing to be able to put the money frontwards to be able for this to happen, and had put me on a monthly salary to obtain my financials where I could be able to work on this full time all the way up even today. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Have I been what? No, ma'am. I have not been contacted by Jim Garrison, and everything that I own were in these men's possession at this time.
What is Matsu Corporation?
Matsu Corporation.
It's Matsu, M-A-T-S-U. It's in Midland, Texas.
What kind of corporation is that, and what's your position?
My position is to be able to work with Matsu, represent Matsu as a corporation. I also represent my family. I represent two sides of people in this story, the Matsu Corporation and the White family.
Before all this started, what were you, a welder?
No, sir, I was a salesman for Great Guns Logging in Midland, Texas.
You said that you had, somebody said, what do you want to gain? You said nothing yet.
I have not gained a dime besides the salary. I would like to see a book in the process at this time. I'd like for Gary Shaw and Larry Harris to be able to do this for me because of their secrecy that they have obtained to me, and that is the most valuable thing at the time that we have. Is Larry being able to hold this story to himself, not to tell anybody until the time that y'all know is today.
I have a question for Reverend Shaw. Was there a deathbed confession of any sort?
Can I answer that? It was not a deathbed confession. It was a statement that he made before his death.
What was the statement? Do you want to tell us?
I would let Reverend Shaw tell you that statement. And to your question, what did you ask? I would like to see a movie. I'm not going to promise you they will be a movie, but I would like to see right now a book wrote about my father and his involvement. Yes, I do. I fear for me and my family very deeply. That is the reason why that we came public at this moment, to let the people know that we are investigating it, and the people that are involved, and the family that is involved, to where we might could have some safety.
You want to repeat your question, please?
I just wondered because you seem to have a confidence with respect to before you guys make a deathbed confession or a statement with respect to what happened to you.
I met with Mr. White and his wife on two separate real strategic occasions. And then I was with him for quite a while during his time in the hospital. I can tell you that he talked all around the specifics of what took place. I was there in his home the day that his wife came back from New Orleans. I referred to that a little while ago. I was called by them to the house the day he told his wife everything that was going on. His wife begged him to tell me maybe I could give him some help. He talked all around it again and did not tell me specifically. He told me that he had been 6 years in the Marines. He had been a plainclothes policeman for a short time. He told me that he had taken lives in service to his country. And he had taken lives in on foreign soil, he'd take lives on soil in this country. He also told me that in the hospital, he was asked, could you tell me, Roscoe, what happened? He told me that it was not an accident, that he saw a man leaving the scene, that there was a can under a bench, and that when he lit his welding torch, there was an explosion. And again, we went over the fact that he had served his country, and that he, in war, you do many things that you're not proud of, and that many times innocent people, have to die.
Michelle, one of the things that you said in your opening statement was that some of the things that they would come out with would be amazing. What were some of the things and what he told you that you found amazing?
I appreciate that question. Let me say this. There were several strategic times in Geneva and Roscoe's life. Geneva overheard several conversations. She overheard the conversation of Jack Ruby and Roscoe detailing the plot to assassinate the president. And it's very interesting that nobody's mentioning names. I'm going to say that. And until somebody comes forward with some names, I'm going to withhold them. Okay? But the plot called for in advance. The plot called for Officer Tippett to be taken out. The plot called specifically for Oswald to be taken to the jail. Oswald was told that he would be picked up. They were to pick him up at a specific location, not at the house, and that he was going to be taken to the airport. He was, the plan, I believe, Tippett finally found, this is my personal opinion, that Tippett finally heard what the plan was. There was a change in plan. And that Tippett heard the change in plan from Roscoe. I want to correct that. That's not my opinion. That's what I know to have heard. That he changed his plan, that the plan was changed. Tippett argued with him, and he said he was told specifically, you'll have to get your instructions from higher up. Roscoe was in constant contact with someone else throughout this whole endeavor. And in the argument, Tippett was shot. Geneva overheard this before it happened. That Oswald would be taken to jail, and that Jack Ruby said, I will take care of Oswald. Roscoe said, I will take care of the president, and I will take care of Tippett. She heard much more that day. She also heard in detail a conversation the day she came back from New Orleans. She overheard a conversation where Roscoe called a particular individual. She overheard that conversation in detail. She had a tremendous way of doing her own investigative knowledge. 6 weeks before his death, he went to Houston on an emergency trip. She followed him in a taxi to a dock. She overheard the conversation down there. 2 weeks before he died, she also overheard the conversation. And I could go on and on with a lot more stuff.
Was Guy Bannister or David Berry contacted in New Orleans?
No.
Was there any other officials without taking part in mention by Jack Ruby or Roscoe? Was there any other Dallas city officials or county sheriff?
Jack Ruby knew in advance that Oswald would be taken, would be moved. It was part of the plan that had been settled higher up. He knew that Oswald would be moved. She overheard this discussion back before it ever happened, and that he would be moved. And Jack Ruby said that he had taken care of everything on that end, and that would go down as planned. That he would shoot the man before the TV cameras.
Sean, that being the case, when you knew about the plot, based on what was
Jack Ruby and Roscoe were ones who knew about the plot in this location at that particular time. There's certainly a lot of others involved.
such as,
I told you I'm not going to give any other name. Yes. Jack Ruby, as I understand it, was the one who recommended that Officer Tippett be involved to the extent he was. He was attached to him. I'm being told back here to go ahead and give one name. You see the advice I have? No. Yes, sir. I do not have information on that.
you know, are they not higher up than what we know?
Repeat the question, sir. Yes, sir, there are some higher ups that were responsible for the government officials are involved.
Was Charles Harrelson's name mentioned in any of these?
No, sir.
What about Mr. Nelson?
No, sir.
What about Captain Fred?
Man. It's been suggested I quit while I'm ahead. I don't believe at this time I'll give you those names, okay? You get me in the right place under on the court of law, and I'll be happy. You get me under some protection, I'll be happy to give the information. The answer to that is yes. That was a few months before today. Yes, I'd say he was a former government official. Question? Yes, Ms. White's still alive. She has asked that I be her spokesman. That's what she's asked for, and that's what I'm doing. She has many. She has a lot of business problems. Dr. Pearson here in Dallas. The instructions on 2 occasions was her husband. The third and fourth time, I had 2 different names there that I'm supposed to give out this time. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You have to understand that over a short period of time taking place, and I know it contradicts what Larry has said, that he personally doesn't believe that Officer Tippett could be a part of the plot. I told you that the key words for Oswald and Tippett both is that they were patsies, and so I would have to support to quite an extent what Larry has said related to Officer Tippett. No, sir.
Real quickly, and I know y'all probably getting tired of all this, the diary was something that Anthony White obviously picked very carefully. carefully. I will say also that secreted away with the cables, with his dog tag that identifies him, with the other chair that identifies that there's another book. We don't know the significance of this right now. And it's very cryptic in its language. Some of his photographs have been pasted in it. But if you think that the man did not keep the records and leave something behind to help in the solution of this case, this is something that will be done by this team and by other experts in the very near future.
What is off the FBI express? What do you say about the allegations?
He is still in making no comment. Okay, pardon? No, his no comments. No.
Tell us why you think the government
The same reason that my father was a military man. The orders, the diaries he represented stated that he was a government official. He did as he was told by our government. I cannot, he is not here to tell us the motive. I cannot give you that. I won't even speculate. I cannot tell you. I mean, I cannot speculate for a person that's not even here. You know, no comment.
The backyard photograph, of course, the famous photograph of Oswald in the backyard holding the weapon in one hand, communist newspapers in another, a pistol on his hip, was used to frame Lee Harvey Oswald, basically, and put him before the American people. He was on the cover of Life magazine. A lot of people don't know that there were other photographs taken in the backyard at that time, and part of the evidence for the Warren Commission. This one did not surface until it was found in the possession of the widow of Roscoe White, which indicates that he had access to and within the police department. And there's only one negative still remaining, and that is the one of the very famous one that you've seen in Life magazine. All of the other negatives have disappeared for some unknown reason, and this one photograph showed up in the hands of Roscoe White. That's been in question for a number of years, the forgery aspect of those, and I think it's very open to further investigation. I think it's a good possibility, yes, and so did, and in the final analysis, all of the people who have examined it had to say that a very clever forgery could not be determined. You're on the list of what? That is an ongoing part of this. No.
Ma'am, do you want me to tell you the man's name that are involved in Monsoon Corporation? Gary Bailey is the president of Monsoon Corporation. He would be needed to be contacted to reveal the other man's name. At this time, they probably don't want me again. But Gary has come forward and is the president of Monsoon. He is an old businessman. He is here today. Yes, sir. No, that is like taking several years to be able to go to. We have gone to Lake Whitney on several occasions, like Joe, I told you, we went out there with shovels and pits. At first, we thought the container was located in Lake Whitney, which is down towards Waco, where a lot of these men had gathered at different times to be able to meet with each other. Basically, what I was going off of at the time that we were at Lake Whitney was strictly memory, not going by what my father had left. I'd taken a paper sack that had bark in it and had remembered where the bark had been located. It was a tree out at Lake Whitney, and shavings off the same tree would be the spot. The paper would be a symbol. We had thought that it was probably at the fireplace of Lake Whitney, which it wasn't. And at that time, we were on the process of calling it a day when my mother had told me of the fact that the only other place it could be would be in Paris, Texas. I immediately went to Paris, having an idea of what the formula had told me. Had to look for 45 minutes before I found the container. And if the house had never been burnt inside, I probably would have never been able to find the container, because the water that the firemen used had warped the board in the attic. It showed about 2.5 inches of the container behind the wall. It was on the paper sack. It was in the footlocker.
Did anybody ever interview the FBI agent that took the diary that was seen from the scene?
No, sir. I've never talked, only time I've ever talked to him is on the phone.
You know who he is?
Yes, I do. I was less than 3 years old. My father would take, at the first trip that we went to Van Horn, Texas with my whole family. We do have a postcard where my mother had sent it to my grandmother, my Aunt Linda, and Uncle Walton, telling them now of the environment in Van Horn in West Texas. I remember 3 or 4 other occasions that we went back to Van Horn. At first, it seemed to be a hunting trip, a vacation. There were 4 other men there that obtained there with my father. There was another little boy that was with me that was 3 years older than I was, that I could recollect, and he was there. We played. We ventured off from the house on one occasion. We had an electrical plant that was assisting the power of the house. The little boy had shoved a stick into the pellets. I remember getting in trouble and getting whippings over it. And the same factor is that we used to walk down the stream and throw rocks into the little stream. It was a river. And at that time, we heard fire shots coming from beyond the canyon. We walked up into the canyon where we could see his father on one side, my father on the other side, firing into what we know as a vehicle. And I saw that as a little boy. My wife and I had gone back to this place 2 years ago. It's taken a lot of time, a lot of effort for me to place all this into my mind. It's not like I woke up one morning and I remembered it all at one time. It's taken a lot of time, a lot of effort. Every time I go back, it seems like I remember a little bit more each time I go. The assistance of Matsu Corporation has given me all their appreciation. I've never offered for any protection, because at any given time, I've never thought my life was a threat.
Are they getting any rights in return for what they have done for you?
Yes, ma'am. They're in the picture of the Roscoe White story. They are funders of the story. They did fund the story. They have funded all the way up until today, and probably will fund it all the way up until the book or whatever is done to the story.
So that's why they got into it?
No, they did it strictly at first as people being inquisitive of the John F. Kennedy, getting the money that was spent on it, got to be over the amount that they, at the time, wanted to be able to spend, and has gone over a large amount of money to be able to put this story together. Sir? There's 2 other people that have seen the diary but has not read it. It's not an item that I would even share with y'all as people in this room, even today. That's correct. My mother did read only the part about the assassination in 1985 when I came across it and went to her house and confronted her about my father's involvement, and how come this has been a secret, and how come that you didn't come forward and tell us this. And it was a shock to not only her but me.
Why haven't you contacted this FBI agent? Do you know his name?
Yes, I do. But,
Why not?
but for the same factor is for 5 hours, those guys really deeply hurt me to the factual that even to now, I would not even work for the FBI in any way or form. They took me and willingly trying to work with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, pushed me aside as just one of those nuts of the John F. Kennedy assassination.
What's his name?
It's already in your book.
Did the FBI look at his diary?
This is the last question.
This is the last question. Go ahead and ask it.
Did the FBI look at the diary?
Looked at the diary and set it on the table, and they told me that my father had a very imagination and laid the diary back down on the table. I gathered all the material up in the room that we were at, boxed it up, and carried it back to my car. So when I left the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the diary was still in the box. And it was only about an hour later when Tom Ferris, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, knocked at my door and had said to my wife that he had left a notebook in the box.
If you want to ask further questions, you can do it individually, but I think I'm thinking long enough. Gary Shaw would like one remark before the question.
I want to say thank y'all very much for coming out here and hearing us all out. I really do appreciate it.
I want to just say very quickly that when Ricky White came, I was very skeptical. I believed Ricky White was telling the truth about what he had seen, heard, and knew. I hope you realize that that's what he's doing. I know this is all energy mind, and I want to just go ahead and lay it out. What if this is some elaborate hoax perpetrated by some other individual? But that has to be addressed. It could be something like that. But what I want you to know is that there was a Warren Commission hoax, a House Select Committee on Assassinations hoax, and if this is a hoax, at least we're trusting it to the American people to make that decision. Okay?
I would like to close with the same remark that I opened a couple of hours ago. And then what you have heard today is not a story that the center has. He brought this to us. We think the story is complete. We think it is correct. If it is a hoax, it is one of the most elaborate and senseless hoax that's ever been perpetrated. We don't think it is, but we certainly believe that possibility. Thank you all for coming. If you have further questions, we'll be glad to try to answer them individually.